about FBD.
Not far off a 400 million turnover organisation. We're the biggest Irish-owned entity. Our USP is people, and we invest heavily in that.
As a leader though, did you learn to instill that kind of feedback culture?
If you can encapsulate what am I bringing in 3 statements or 3 sentences or 3 points, and say what's your role as a colleague in this, and what does success look like for you, that starts to really make it personal and collectively explaining that impact. So feedback is a gift. Feedback from family, friends and co-workers alike is the most important feedback, especially negative feedback. I still recall a conversation with one of my eldest daughter, a lot of teenage problems, and straight away I was in to fix this, and just one day she just said, stop trying to solve my problems and please just listen.
You mentioned Heraty as one of the best managers, best leaders that you've kind of witnessed, and I'm really curious, what was her leadership style and a management skill set that you witnessed that still to this day you're like, okay, she was a brilliant manager?
Absolutely, definitely the best person I've ever worked for. And I suppose a couple of reasons. Very clear on goals. Her own talent level was extreme. She's a really bright person, really good at sales, really good at relationships.
Enda, you're very welcome. Thanks a million for saying yes to coming on the podcast.
And very much appreciated, Neil. Thank you. It's good to come in and talk and have a good old chat.
We'll see where we go. I like to go back a little bit, if that's okay, just where we try to figure out some of where these values and principles come from in your early years. So just give us a sense. You grew up in a small town, isn't it? Right, Roscommon, County Roscommon?
Yeah, County Roscommon, on the border of Longford and Roscommon. So a town called Ainsborough. So it's just at the top of Heraty. And literally, I grew up on the direct Roscommon side, so stone's throw away from the River Shannon, and sort of regarded really as a power station town. So it was really the fulcrum of our town or village. About 1,200 population, and expanded then through a huge amount of people working aboard the motors. So it was a power station burned peat, obviously turned into electricity, and everything revolved around that. And our side of the town were typically engineers who worked in the power station, and the other side of the town were typically more the board and one of people who worked out in the bogs. And so it was all actually a lovely place to grow up. A little bit of friction now between Longford and Roscommon, 2 different
rivalries.
Two rivals, yeah, definitely big sporting rivalries, but a huge bond, like a lovely place to grow up, and with a lot of freedom there. So.
And you were the eldest of four boys,
Four eldest, four males, yeah. My parents are both teachers, so my mother was a Roscommon woman, my dad was a Galway man, and they actually met. He used to play football for Roscommon, and they met at an Albert Reynolds dance in Castlereagh, 4,500 people, and literally she bumped right into him. So he was 6'5", and they were all looking out for a particular Roscommon player, and she tells a story of literally walking around through the crowds and just banging into his chest. And he asked her out to dance, and it started from there. So it's.
I love the romance.
The halls of romances. Yeah.
The equivalent of swiping these days.
Exactly. Yeah. That's pure lucky dip.
I love it. And help me understand then. So parents, teachers, and I guess sporting family. Yeah. But you had a curiosity and interest, and you were quite good at, I suppose, maths and science and figuring stuff out from an early year, right? From early age. Like, give us a sense of where that kind of came from then, and where that led you.
Yeah, so we all played sport, and loads, between football, a little bit of hurling, soccer, tennis, athletics. There was quite a rich tapestry of opportunities for us, and they were very much supported. And you cycle to all these things. I mean, that was the whole ideology of the place. But I like an average sportsman. I mean, I play and I take my place in the team. I wouldn't be quite a strong sports person, but very much love logic. I love tinkering with things and taking stuff apart and fixing stuff and actually just pondering why is something not working. So invariably anything that went wrong in the house, including our cars, we fixed them. Dad built our house, and when I was growing up, we built the extension, we built all the sheds around the house. So, and that was, pick and shovel, we dug the foundations, laid the blocks, did most of the wiring ourselves, most of the plumbing. So a lot of it was hands-on. But for me personally, I always had a curiosity about how things work, why they work in certain ways, and quite logical and analytical about things, and quite patient. So it sort of stood to me over time. The harder things get, the calmer I get. And I really, there's no use getting frustrated with a device or a machine. It's not doing something on purpose. And I often used to, especially if I was getting frustrated, I'd stop, I'd go and do it again. And I always remember the first best gift I got from my parents for Christmas was the Haynes manual for one of the cars. And I used that copiously to take the car apart regularly. Sometimes though we had a few biscuit tins full of stuff, didn't go back till I found where it went back. But the joke was the car always worked. But that was nature. Like take stereos apart, you fix bicycles, whatever it was. I enjoyed that very much.
And that obviously led then, I'm just trying to visualize. So back when, your parents are teachers, if we look at tech and I suppose the journey that you took, and then I suppose what they probably had visualized the journey you'd have taken, what was that like in the house? Like when you were trying to have a conversation and, they were trying to maybe steer you maybe in a certain path, but you kind of chose a different path. How did that go down? That
was an interesting insight. Now, in fairness, my parents were very much a live and let live. So, three adages really was good values and live your personality, good hygiene and a good education, and off with you. That was that was the whole. Education really important. You were introduced by your qualification over time. That was there. So as the eldest with both parents as primary school teachers, the family business, as they put it, was what I was destined for. And we didn't have a whole heap of money, but we weren't eligible for grants. So there was a lot of savings put aside for myself. My next brother was a year from me, then it was 3-year gap, then 2 more brothers. So there were choices there. But fundamentally, teaching I felt wasn't for me. I wanted to do something around logic, maths, something analytical. I liked physics, I liked engineering. And at the time, there wasn't a whole heap of things around tech. I mean, the most thing you'd see in tech is when you went into a bank branch, perhaps, or maybe an opticians or something. So to anchor my parents, I wanted to do something involving technology. They found it very hard to ground that down to, well, what exactly does that mean? What's a career like that like?
Oh, like how do you make money? How do you monetize that?
What do you deliver? What's your impact? And I couldn't actually articulate it, and they couldn't visualize it. So in the middle of it, there was a vacuum for a period of time, and a bit of frustration on their part, and also mine, because I didn't want to. I respected the fact that I had loads of opportunities, a lot of freedom. They're very supportive parents. Authoritarian to an extent, because they were very straight-laced and conservative in their views. So we respected those boundaries. But I actually needed to break free a bit. And in the end, we sort of came to a compromise. And the compromise was that I didn't go initially for a 4-year degree. I took a certificate course in one of the colleges, and up to me to choose. And it was a sort of a suck it and see approach. And if I could articulate where I wanted to go, and did I enjoy, did I get something out of it, was it fulfilling, then take a steer from there.
Quite a smart
way
to do it, though, isn't it? Like, dip your toe in, don't over, give it so it's like nearly a middle ground, was it?
It was in ways, but also it was, especially on my mother's side, wasn't a degree. So the commitment was, okay, you're going to do a certificate, but actually you need to commit to the degree, which is going to take longer, and that's part of the choice. So it was, here's what you're signing up for. It's a longer road, but we've backed you on this, and really a big outcome for us is we want to see that qualification, because it means a lot to us as teachers and where we come from.
Okay, so the values again,
education and commitment, so
follow through. Got it. And help me understand this then, right? Because you were quite entrepreneurial, I think, from an early age. Like even when you were in college, you referenced some things when we were chatting there recently. It's okay if you want to talk about this when you I think you were looking at different ways. You obviously you had a value for money, and you were value for work, and you were working different jobs, and you were doing your education. Give me a sense of how you kind of earned money through those periods of time when you were I suppose getting education and away from home. Give me a sense.
So there was a sense of actually trying to be self-sufficient. So there's a little bit of, okay, I've made the decision that's very much about me. A little bit, not so much gone against my parents, but actually gone a different direction. And also I wanted to be able to say I can stand on my own 2 feet. Basically a couple of opportunities came up. So one is we did a lot of summer work and part-time work at home, so relatively skilled around different things. But basically I took a job in a hotel on the outskirts of Dundalk. So 3 weekends a month, Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights, I worked the nightclub floors, basically cleaning the place up, picking glasses, doing the usual stuff. It's fairly well paid. Could be a couple of fights and scraps going around. So I got paid well. You get a bit of food, whatever drink was left over, you could have some of it, and if it wasn't slaps. So that was 3 weekends a month, and once a month I came home. I get a bus to Dublin, and get a bus or a train to Longford, and then Mum or Dad would collect me there and home to get washing done. Yeah, and then 2 nights a week then I worked in a place called the Four Lanterns, the McDonald's of Dundalk.
Oh yeah.
And that was good. I basically cut chickens all the time, so I was the best going at doing the southern fried chicken, but it was free food. So by and large, ate fairly well. Really well run place, extremely clean. You know, people have a lot of different stories about takeaways, but anything that touched an unclean surface was binned and accounted for. So integrity was a hugely important thing for them as business. And like there was nights where there was absolute pitch battles out past the counter. There was guys fighting, coming across the counter. You had to come out and help out, and so that was sort of fun. And then an opportunity came up in the college, in that they'd expanded out a whole, I suppose, ideology of getting more strong sports players from different codes in playing, and many of them weren't that focused on the academic side. And for the college, it was important that they nurtured the educational side as well as that. Yeah. So I'll pick my words funny here, but basically I myself and 2 other guys became the equivalent of the chat GBT in that we assisted these people do their projects, and I got paid for it. So it was sort of get them everybody there safely, and you know, I left college with a fair bit of cash in my back pocket and no debt, and I absolutely thoroughly loved Dundalk.
When is this now? This was during...
this is 86 to 88, and Dundalk was, I mean, people might be offended, but it was El Paso was the nickname. It was we regularly cycled across the border up to Jonesboro, up to Newry. Like there was no ends to. When you're there and in an environment, people are people, you know, and you have your same share of excellent people, people who don't care and people who cause trouble. And I hung out with good people in college, and we did some sort of mad stuff too, which you do at that age. But you're learning. Part of it's harmless and part of it is just fun. But you know, touch wood, and thankfully never got myself the wrong side of issues. But I enjoyed college, and I also enjoyed because the subjects I was doing really appealed to me. And I think it was the first at the time to get 100% in end of year COBOL exams. Nobody got that. And
I was like mainframe, they were the big...
Yeah, it's COBOL RPG, Visual Basic. They were the 3 things. Really strong on pseudocode, analysing. And to me, actually, it was a 40-hour week. So you had full 8-hour days, 5 days a week, and you didn't turn up, you didn't qualify. And actually, I still probably rate that certificate in Dundalk as probably one of the best IT courses I've ever done. And I've done other ones, but we were fully immersed. Our lectures were really good. I mean, they were very practical, they were work-oriented, and they were about how do you code to get good quality, do it right first time, but make your code editable by other software engineers or programmers, as we were called at the time. So the whole basis for a future in tech was laid by some simple things done really well.
And how did you cope with like you were doing unsocial hours with the different work, and then obviously the commitment for it's not just waltzing in for a couple of hour lecture a day and then picking, you know what I mean? Like you clearly were just able to function.
I bounced back even still. I spent 20 years of my 37 years consulting. You're oftentimes 14, 16-hour days. That's the commitment. And you could be having your food or drink with clients, and you might be getting to bed 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. You're up at 6. So I repair quickly and repair well, and I know that. But also, I grab sleep when I need to, and I'm not shy about that. And I do watch what I eat and drink, so I don't go on the hog all the time. You need a bit of balance. But also I know I exercise a lot, so. And I take downtime, so those in moderation.
You recharge it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to be yo-yoing a bit today, right? So
perfect.
Just bear with me. I'm actually going to go into the present because I want to talk about FBD actually. And for those in our audience that haven't a clue who FBD Insurance are, who are they? Give me a bit of a match of the day on who they are for those that have never heard.
So FBD is in existence of just over 50 years. And it was founded in the 60s by farmers, for farmers, to get insurance. So I think it's one of the success stories of Ireland. in that in the 50s, after the education grew here and second level education, we had an awful lot more farm families became educated in accountancy, engineering, all those sort of higher end skill sets. And these people were coming home and looking at the farms and saying, we can use bigger, better machinery, we could do things differently, but they couldn't get insurance. And really the insurance companies at the time wouldn't back it. And in the early 60s, about 3,500 farmers all pitched in about 50 Irish pounds a time per share, and they grew FBD. So Farmer Business Developments is where FBD came out of, and it's grown from then. We're not far off a 400 million turnover organisation, or a PLC. Very strong, obviously, in farm and agri, very strong in business insurance, and your normal home and motor insurance are fairly hallmarks of what's there. We're the biggest Irish-owned entity, and we're top 3 and 4 across Ireland consistently against the big players in insurance. Entrepreneurial organisation, very, very affirmative and affiliative. So we are what our people represent. We invest in our branches. We have 34 branches and a contact centre in Maynooth and our head office just out on the Naas Road. But our USP is people, and we invest heavily in that. And for us, we build a lot of trust, and we might talk about that, how that manifests itself. But for us, it's that relationship, it's the trust, our commitment.
You're the Chief Technology and Operations Officer, right?
Yeah.
So
2 roles, yeah.
Yeah. What's the hardest part about your job?
I suppose the hardest part is actually balancing the need for governance, regulation and compliance with an engineering and a processing function. So, you go back 8-10 years in these type of roles, you rocked up, you had a specification or an outcome or a business requirement or a strategy, whatever it was, and you by and large procured or engineered a system to get you there safely. And the proof of the pudding was, well, does it work? But now in modern days, IT is the center of everything. I mean, it's a really positive thing for our I suppose our profession, is that we are now front and center of everything. We're part of the strategy, we're part of the future. But we're also now part of serious risk. So you just cannot afford, it's like, you go back a couple of years, it'd be unheard of to have misstatements in your financial accounts. So accountancy and financial reporting went through that. IT is going through that now. So really the last couple of years really is about that change, because I didn't come into this world being a person who suppose likes being controlled, likes going through governance, likes having frameworks and things to do, and it's adapting into that has been probably one of the bigger things. But we've invested heavily as a company with huge support of our board and leadership colleagues. But for us as a team in an engineering discipline, it is one of the things of winning hearts and minds, and thankfully influencing is one of my strong traits. Is how do we get people there to understand this is table stakes to work in really good career in a complex technology and business environment. We have to ace it, we have to do really well. So a lot of it is that, I suppose, Neil, it's the balance between delivery and outcomes, because I'm very delivery focused, and also then meeting the requirements of governance, audit, risk, compliance, the regulations. And I suppose, and the last one on it is that in typical companies, leadership ebb and flow about who's doing things for and with each other. In a regulated environment, you're all together. You're all bound by everybody's success or an individual person's failure. So we have to mark each other's homework. There's a whole way of doing that we've learned, and that's really important as part of the culture of governed organisations. And it's, you take it or you leave it. That's the way it works.
You referenced it, and a few people I've known over the years that have worked in the insurance industry. It's bloody complex. It's tricky, and a lot of scrutiny. You're in the public eye. There's a lot of visibility, and I suppose there's a lot of change. And obviously, you've alluded to that in relation to transformation change, particularly digital, right?
Yeah.
What's the go a bit deeper for me in relation to the complexity. What from an outside-in perspective, what makes that sector itself very unique and very specific in relation to the challenges?
Yeah, other sectors. So. At its core, insurance products actually have a huge depth to them. So if you think most businesses and even say ordinary banking are very horizontal in how you represent a business process and that, insurance products go very deep. So an average product, say we'd have a consumer car product, that probably has about 15,000 rules in it. So what the rule base is there to do is, if you go back, insurance came out of the 1600s in London for all the fires, and actually the ideology hasn't changed. It's a social utility. It's many put in money, to actually pay out the claims of the few. And that ideology still exists, except it's got far more complex. And so rather than everybody just chipping in their share, you need to have a sophistication that says, well, Enda has a particular type of car, he's a particular age, so therefore the likelihood of something happening to or with Enda represents this premium. Neil is different, and you're trying to calculate what is a fair price for somebody to insure what they're doing, and that goes in there. Also trying to predict what the likely claims are. So in business, it's sort of bounded by, how much you need to pay out for the business to keep it going. Same for farm, same for home. But a car is a blank check. So for €600-700, you can have millions to pay out on accidents. So it's actually quite a challenging business to figure out your financial model. It takes a lot of work, a lot of actuaries doing work there. It's quite serious. Insurance companies kind of do go bust very easily. So recklessness, inappropriate risk taking is not acceptable. So you have to try and figure out where that sweet spot is. So you can have a really fabulous year by the fact you didn't have 2 or 3 storms in the year, and you can have a really bad year with 2 or 3 storms. So capital is very important. And in Ireland with the central bank, it's a huge focus for them, obviously, in insurance and in banking, that we're properly capitalised. And capital is not free. So I think a huge change over time is that ordinary member of the public wouldn't realise is you can't underwrite to a loss anymore. You must actually break even or show a profit on underwriting. So previously you'd make money in the investments. We make little or no money on investments now, and you must have enough capital to have a 1 in 20 year event coming out of the thing. And investors need returns. So when you're managing and plotting your business, you have all these moving parts, which are a lot of variables, which we use systems obviously and data to help us with. But we still have to calculate how much do we need to pay the claims out, how much do we need to pay to run the business, how much do we need to pay back our investors because they need a dividend, and how much do we need to invest. And actually I'm the only role holder who asks the board for money every year, because we are only truly invest through technology to deliver on the strategy. So I'm always front and centre in my role representing the organisation and my colleagues to say we want to deliver these things over 3 to 5 years but actually you need the money there, so you need to be profitable.
How did you influence on that though, right? So when we're talking about a traditional type of business, a big legacy of tenure as an organisation or success, the backbone of the Irish economy in relation to agriculture and the heritage and the history of that, right? But then when you're trying to win hearts and minds, and you're trying to demonstrate future value rather than just pure cost centre, what are the skills and the leadership traits that you've had to, I suppose, learn, particularly in this chapter that you're in? Give us a sense of how some of those meetings go with CFOs and CEOs, and particularly when with different macro changes in the environment and that kind of stuff. Give us a sense, because you're digital transformation and the what's people's expectations and tech being at the heart of everything. But how do you really kind of demonstrate that value and then sort of reverse engineer it and ultimately win hearts and minds and get the budget to do to execute?
No, so it's a great question, Neil. Well, the reverse engineer is actually is probably the key phrase there that because what you want to do is you want to look at what's a successful outcome for everybody. So all stakeholders, including the business, including customers, the regulator, our investors, employees. What would it manifest itself like over a 3 or 5 year horizon? And he's sort of working backwards and says, well, what needs to be in place to make that happen? And it's often about skill sets and people, how processes work, how digital lands, how you use data, all these different things. So there's probably 3 things that inform that when you're trying to influence and actually sell an outcome. So one of them is, how does the business get to a position where you're successful? What technology delivers that? So you can break that down. And most of it is actually common or garden, changes your system of record, how you do something at a digital level, how you become more efficient, how you get more accurate factual outcomes quicker. Right? So they're all sort of there. So you're basically determining an IT strategy that aligns with the business strategy. In our environment, it's slightly different when you do that. Is we don't go off in isolation and come up with an IT strategy, because we're all joined at the hip. Everybody gets to participate. So it is very much, it's a discussion, it's challenge processes. We take a lot of advice. So we do measure 3 times, cut once. So for us to be able to convince others, we have to be open, collaborative, that says open book, come and look, come and play, challenge our views, challenge where we're going, bring in somebody else as a sounding board, but collectively when we say we're done, we are going, right? So that's a thing. So when I go in front of the board, I go with the backing of all my colleagues. We typically have signposted to the board where we're going and where we're going technology. So every quarter I'm into either the board, audit committee, risk committee. So we're constantly re-articulating where we're going. And then we have IT strategy for IT. So we always have technical debt of some sort. We're always, it's the iceberg analogy is there's loads of stuff under the surface. That takes more effort to educate and to constantly re-remind, why do we need to actually invest in this piece of kit? What's happening with suppliers? How do we stay current? And really also have to remember, really, leadership, they have an ability to actually grasp what's going on right now. But our terminology and taxonomy goes deep. You have to keep re-reminding, what does this mean? Why do we set out to do this? What decision do we make? Where are we going next and why? So it's storytelling, it's also patience and respecting the fact that the listener may need to be brought along on a journey before they can make a decision. And actually, you have to invest time in preparing. And over the years, I probably would have gone and said, how are things, folks? I'm here, I'm going to sort it out. No, you have to prepare and think through and put yourself, empathize with the different people across the room. And also, I know we've chatted about it, is I have a particular profile, but all the other profiles in the room are different. So you need to articulate an outcome that actually resonates with somebody for the reason that they value the information.
Okay, well, I want to go on it because that's the key part. Because when we talk about leadership, and you've referenced it a few times over the years that I've got to know you, but what you're referencing there is around self-awareness, right? In relation to, and you said something to me before, feedback is a gift, right? And knowing people's personalities, being able to kind of have that, needing that data on everyone, so that you can just manage people's maybe emotions or manage people's kind of response to what you're saying, and there's a bit of thought behind that. So have you learned this the hard way then? Like, I'm really curious about this kind of chapter then. Like, how did you become, you referenced that I used to go in and do this and that, like, what was that process of you kind of figuring stuff out in relation to how you become a better leader, I suppose, in relation to messaging, buy-in, bringing people with you, bulldozer, whatever. I'm throwing stuff in, you can go. There's
a bit of that. So I'm primarily an influencer. So in the Discovery Insights thing, for example, I'm a sunshine yellow and I'm a red. So trust me, we'll get it done, and we get it done. So
very quite dominant, is it?
Yeah, it is quite dominant. Me, and I'm boisterous, and I can be loud. And I'm a big person physically too, so I have to be aware sometimes around people if I'm coming on quite strong. I also know under stress I'm a JFDI person, so I know when things get really tough, I just turn to just F and do it now, please. Okay. So I have to balance that, because there was a time I could turn my hand to everything. Now I can do 5% of what the teams do. So I depend on a chain of commitments and a chain of promises. So I can talk all day long about delivering, but if everybody around me is not on the same page, I'm not delivering. But it goes back to in my career I got involved obviously in consulting and things, but working in vision consulting in the early 90s was a huge change for me. So up to then I was really, my word is my bond. I always deliver. Trust me, I'll get it there. And once with vision getting into bigger corporates, bigger enterprises, part of the whole thing was no, you have to plan it. You actually have to plan out and show what you're going to do. You have to deliver it. You have to show some sort of evidence that you have done it. You have to allow them to check it. So a lot of it became the checks and the balances and the tools to do that. I worked with a really good, one of the directors, Brendan Fuller, and a lot of them were ex-Anderson or Accenture. And basically through work experience, and some of it was hard learned, Neil, I learned the way of trying to get structured in how I was doing. So I could still be very good at visualizing. I could have seen around corners. I could visualize really well what success looked like. I could chunk it back, and I could see what was really necessary. And I would articulate, trust me, I know where we're going. Now we're trying to get that down into paper. So that was the first step for me in an awakening about, okay, I'm a structured person, I use logic, I need to explain more in logic terms. And then in later years, I mean, we all did Myers-Briggs, and for me, I was the visionary was my thing, Myers-Briggs. We found it quite hard to relate to each other around the table on Myers-Briggs. You kind of say as well, you had these four-letter acronyms, and what do they really mean, and what are we supposed to do? And it's only in the last 6-7 years where we've used things like Discovery Insights and so from that, where there's a colour. So I know, for instance, I'm a yellow and a red. There's 2 more yellows on the leadership team with me, and we relate to each other really strongly. We are always future-focused, highly energetic, highly alive, and in the room with us, it's never quiet. But also have people who are quite blue, who are very oriented by detail. Yeah, they want. Yeah, so when I work, so if I just
actuaries maybe.
Actuaries and accountants. So when I work with a blue, previously it would be I just nearly try and overpower them with my enthusiasm, my certainty, my confidence, and they're saying, no, I need to see the detail, right? So prior to that, it could be we get frustrated with each other and we circle around a couple of times, but then that became very obvious. And also then with the reds, could be red blues, is I want it done, but I want the detail to back it up, a very governed environment. So what it meant was, all of a sudden, you were actually primed much better to figure out what does a person across the table from me need, how do I articulate that, and also with my team. So, surrounding yourself with really good, the best people you can is the secret to success, there's no doubt about it. And previously I would go with, I suppose, my view of their fit. How do they fit? So I ended up with probably more like-minded people. So people would express themselves strongly, able to hold themselves in an argument, good negotiators. And actually, what's brought forward for me is I've got more people now who are much stronger in planning, much better at documenting things, much better in compliance. And I give them a huge share of voice because they are a huge part of my success now. Is I've given them oxygen and they're helping me and they've educated me. I mean, it's a dry subject. It's hard to penetrate at times. And having somebody there who's not only good at it, but helps guide me, gives me the taxonomy and the use of language, and gradually over time I've got good at it. But that's on the back of somebody's excellence in their career. But a lot of that is actually thanks to the insights in things. I mean, other things that came out is obviously I like talking, so listening is something that you have to work hard at. But I remember doing loads of leadership courses we did active listening, and you do mirroring and all this sort of stuff. It was all fabulous. Yeah. And straight away it's like in one ear, out the other. And I still recall a conversation with one of my eldest daughter. She was only 12 or 13, and like typical dad and a tech dad, she was going through a huge growth phase and a lot of teenage problems. And straight away, I was in to fix this. And just one day she just put it and said, "Stop, Dad, stop. Stop trying to solve my problems and please just listen."
Wow.
Right? That was that was profound, and it's stuck with me ever since. So, some things in life, when they do come along, they're very memorable.
You can learn your best leadership training.
Oh yeah, you kind of do.
From your daughter.
Yeah. And I mean, feedback is a gift. Feedback from family, friends, and co-workers alike is the most important feedback, especially negative feedback. So the warning signs of, are you going in a direction that's not working for, say, you as a person, you don't see it, blind to it, or is your impact not actually how you land? The people closest to you are probably the slowest to give you that feedback, but the most important, and is seek it out. I mean, that's, and I know we've chatted about, I have my wife and I, Nora, have a very balanced relationship. We're 50-50, and we talk about everything as natural and neutral as we can, and that's important. And I suppose the other thing for me is I don't get over excited and happy on success, and I don't get over annoyed with mistakes. So I'm sort of steady, and very calm in a crisis. And, I'll always stop and think, because you have one effort to fix things, and fixing those things has a huge impact on others. So I really think on those things, and I'm glad I'm not a surgeon, because they have to. I have worked with surgeons. Yeah. They have to work on the spot. We have a gift in most times and most things. Time to bounce stuff, yeah. But feedback is a gift. You don't necessarily need it all the time. And another phrase that comes out well, and from a colleague is respond, don't react. I go back to the 90s, and we learned about the difference between what we call assessments and assertions. So an assessment is an opinion, and an assertion is a fact. But most people in the conversation are actually offering up facts as opinions. And it becomes, is it true or false, is it right or wrong? And you get into an argument.
Okay, it's more confrontational.
Yeah. So we learn fairly fast what's that. And also is that most things are questions. So people who are concerned, people who are angry, people who are making complaints, it's a question with some emotion. right? So
It's loaded.
It's loaded.
Yeah.
So can you and you have to work at it. It's not is can you say, hang on a second, okay, this is what's the nub of the question. What does this person want to find out? How do you unpack that, and actually answer the question the way you respond, or asking more questions? Because actually, real active listening is not well you're repeating the question because it's a tool. There's no actually. Hang on a second. I'd like to get in behind this because I want to answer your question. I want to answer your complaint, your concern. They are really good tools.
And how, as a leader, though, did you learn to instill that kind of feedback culture with the people that kind of reported to you, and even coach? Like, is it like you'd have a good system and a good process? Like how do you actually make that land and create kind of good consistency around that, like from a culture perspective? Is there anything that you've learned?
On that,
or any advice that you can give some of our listeners?
I suppose so. A couple of basics is clarity on outcome or the goal or your vision. You can mix them, but why are we working on something together, and what does success look like, and really being clear and trying to articulate that is more important than not. What's a person's role? And I think if you can encapsulate what am I bringing in 3 statements or 3 sentences or 3 points, and the same, what's your role as a colleague in this, and what does success look like for you? That starts to really make it personal, and collectively explaining that impact. So it's, if we're working together and do these things, what are we trying to reach in terms of milestones or checkpoints along the way? What freedom do we have? So we might say, well, we actually need an outcome that looks like this, reacts like this, can be checked like this, but along the way we actually have a lot of flexibility in doing that. So that's where there's a bit of fun, and I think people can feed off that. But there is also points where we must be in the tram lines. So I think being able to explain that.
So it starts at the very beginning, I guess, the point.
Yeah,
so in relation to feedback, it's getting that clarity, purpose, making sure there's an expectation that's well communicated, then there's maybe a buy-in, I suppose, an understanding of what's expected.
No
and
assumptions.
Your role then is to give them the autonomy for the parts that they can have autonomy, and then I suppose facilitate that realignment maybe another time.
So sometimes it's coaching. Coaching is a joint conversation of vulnerability. Okay. So for me, it's not one way. It's like, I think you need to do these things better, or you need to do them worse, or sometimes the sporting thing is tell them 3 good things so you can land a bad message. I mean, they're sort of tools. This really is we are joined at the hip together in this. How are we getting on?
I've heard that called a shit sandwich, actually.
Oh yeah. Or if you're doing it at speed, it's the seagull come in and shit all over you and fly back out again. Yeah. So it's in that analogy, it's so how for me to be successful, I have to constantly raise my own standards, right? So I have to constantly push. Every day is a learning day, and I need to raise the standards around me. I don't always have the skills, while I bring in help to do that. I don't always have all the knowledge, so we open things out. But a big thing is, there isn't always certainty in large IT programs. You can't always get that. There's ambiguity always there, and a little bit of uncertainty, and you're trusting others. So we'll say, and that's where risk management comes in. Like proper risk management is, what are the real things that can catch us out here? What are we certain about? And the danger is not making assumptions in the middle. So we really try and strip things down to say, right, we have to build up a level of certainty and a level of knowledge about how do we know we're going on the outcome. Who's going to articulate back to stakeholders? Stakeholders is a big word, but people who are influenced and affected by this. And also constantly coming back. Because people who go off, like the whole ideology of 2 degrees off course is a different continent. We just bring ourselves back. But also as a leader I'm just there as a figurehead to get people together in a direction. I don't always need to hold the strongest share of voice. I don't need to be most dominant. I need to have a part of the skill set that says Enda's proficient at that, and in that part we trust his judgment. And in the same vein, we have other people who are participating who we trust their judgment. So it's not about hogging the whole limelight and getting there. I think the last thing is about being authentic as a leader. Is I am not shy about saying I haven't a Scooby-Doo about this. We need to learn that. Who can help us out? I always say, who's the guru in the room? What man or woman here really knows this? Who has the scars? Like, not who's done it really well, who's got it done badly, and learn by it. And I am not afraid, because again, it's the measure 3 times, cut once. Because you got in the room and say, right, we're doing it. Now, one of the things I've learned, I suppose, to my cost of leadership is, and it can be a lonely spot, it's quite hard to sort of blue sky and just throw some ideas out. I was thinking about this, or I was sort of musing over that, because some people in the room say, well, everything a C-level roller holder says, it's fact, that we're going to do that. So a few times I've got myself in a model where we're saying, like, let's have a think about that, we might do that, we might assess that. Somebody walks out the room saying, I've just been instructed that we were doing that. Do you know, so
how do you interpret?
Yeah, you have to be careful about that. There's power in your role in what you do, and even though you can have a really good open relationship with people, there is a little element of you can be asked to do something, you can be informed to do it, you can be told to do it, you can be ordered to do it. People will still take away, I am doing this because I've been asked to do it, or I've got a commitment. Got it. So you have to be careful that, and especially as a talker, I have to be careful that in certain settings that I am not just blue skying for the crack of having a conversation. Okay. It's just what are we trying to do? What does it look like? Get everybody in the room engaged. Get all the views out. Get the feedback. Because you might as well get, if people are unhappy and they think it's wrong, let's get it out now then.
Facilitate that.
Oh yeah. Because then you're rescuing something at speed.
Yeah.
Where you could have done so at a standstill. Oh Jesus, yeah.
Speaking of scars, right, and I want to talk about badges of honour. In America, the badges of honour is sometimes more of a positive connotation to a failure, right? Yeah. Here in Ireland, England, and messed up here. This didn't go as expected, and it was a blip or whatever, right? Tell me, like an entrepreneur, you've had your roll of the dice and setting things up yourself and backing yourself and paddling your own canoe and doing very bits and pieces. Give me a sense of one of the. There's not that many, I don't think, but there was one that you spoke to me about before that I'd love you to share today, right? Where it didn't end well, right, in business. It didn't end well, and I'm really curious about what you really learned about yourself in a bloody tough chapter. So I'd love you to just share that story. You know what I'm referring to?
Oh, right? yeah.
Still raw.
Yeah.
Still want to see the blood.
So I came out of consulting is a great career. And I highly advise it to anybody because you get a lot of roundedness in doing that. But at my heart, it's sort of always an entrepreneur spirit and actually a risk-taking spirit that's there. And I got involved in .com startups, consulting firms, and I still remember the plane hitting the World Trade Center and funding going, winding companies up. And I did a startup with a colleague of mine in mobile payments, mobile top-up, and that became very successful. Did a huge amount of work. With cable and wireless worldwide on the back of that, then got acquired by a payments company in the States, and in theory we ended up going from bootstrapping a company and getting paid every odd month if we're lucky to 2.5 million shareholding in a US firm, and over time then that business migrated to the States. It was sort of a natural progression. Myself and Lee, my business partner, weren't really going to go there. We had 19 people working for us in Rawalpindi, Pakistan, doing development. So they became part of our organisation. We got a couple of bob, and we had the shareholding in this American company. And I thought, okay, we've proved done well here, and this engine could measure anything. So it could measure any content and monetize it. So, and you could monetize it through people's phones. And we banking compliant transaction engine, so it was very, very powerful.
When was this now? What time?
This is 2003 into 2004, okay. Way ahead of its time, Neil. So where it actually came out really strong was mobile top up. So at the time, scratch cards.
Easy top, was it? Ding?
Ding, yeah. And in fact, the company who bought the technology, it was hosted, so software as a service, ahead of its time again. They really were selling huge license deals to major telcos, $2, $3, $4 million a time. We were doing 15 grand a month, unlimited transactions. So our service is a door opener, and they use it as a door opener, but actually they let it dissipate over time, which is an awful pity because it was a really interesting way of working. But anyway, I got an agreement from the board and the investors to utilize the technology. So I approached Apple at the time and Sony, and Apple said they liked it, but it wasn't for them. They had their own version, but Sony liked it, but not with a startup. So I said, okay, well, how do I get a proof of concept going? I said, well, get into bed with somebody with a contract with us, any type of commercial business relationship where we've got a bound contract and we'll play ball. So anyway, a rush of blood to the head, and I bought a Sony distributor in Ireland. So second generation company, Primarily doing a huge amount of work in the whole car side, so all the Sony stereos, Kenwood stereos, Clifford alarms, all those car care shops, buy racers, all that sort of stuff. Some laptops going into business, TVs, hi-fi systems. So it was sort of struggling to get anywhere as a company, sort of washing its face. So I did a structured deal. I bought it based on cleaning up the balance sheet and trying to develop it over time. So I suppose I went in with two mistakes of entrepreneurship. I went in on my own, so I didn't bring other people with me because I didn't feel the business could support the additional cost. But then I didn't have anybody where we could divide and conquer what was there, because there were problems. I didn't have enough cash. So although the business was profitable over time, cash flow and working capital became a big issue. But basically, at its basic, we were selling a lot of product into retailers. So we are an importer distributor with Sony. We're selling a huge amount, predominantly car care. So in those days, you get about 23-24% gross margin selling to shops. Most of them wouldn't pay till about 90, 120 days. And you're bankrolling that. But the margin is high enough and the volume is good enough. And then Halifords came into Ireland. So Halifords are a really slick machine, and they normally put €1.5 million into each location, and very good at price promotions, marketing, and all the retailers we were selling to just panicked. So their view was that they needed to go around us as a distributor and try and get more margin. Because we were saying, actually, Halifords and all these, they're playing a game. They're playing a game about marking something up on price, and they're actually selling for the same price you were selling at to just make it look better. So let's collectively get together a market. So we had a lot of main retailers then were buying direct from the European market. So, and they were trying to resell product to other retailers. So we had this whole circuitous thing of everybody was buying in, nobody's paying their bills. So all of a sudden, working capital became a big issue. At the time, having done well, I had a lovely BMW, and my Orla had a lovely Mercedes Jeep. So I flogged, and I had shares in companies that flogged it all. So Jeeps went, car went. I got an old demo Renault for Orla, and I bought a van. So I put everything I could into the company, but progressively interest rates were 8-9%. So the margin was starting to drop quite a lot, and I was running out of cash. So we looked at other things. So I started selling more laptops into commercial companies, but again, couldn't get paid. So you're on to 90, 120 days. I paid Sony every 30 days. So you become a banker for all that's there. And as a last ditch thing, started working with property developers then who were fitting out show houses. So we really had the best of the best Sony gear between the TVs, a very aspirational brand. Wiring out surround sound systems and houses, and I did all that the weekends. So basically, the van came in useful in its time because you'd fill it full of kit, and many developers themselves were cash strapped, so they're rolling from one debt outcome to another debt outcome, and there was a view that they didn't pay their bills. Some of them couldn't. So after about 18 months or so, I remember collecting a whole lot of checks, and a really good accountancy firm, and I said, look, I don't see an out on this. Can we talk about how we might restructure it? Can I get some investment in? And really, number one, I let it go too far. It wasn't investable. So as a reseller of fast-moving consumer electronics with low margin, not a hope. And okay, there was added value in the installation work, the delivery work, the service ethic. It really wasn't enough margin to do things. So
it wasn't sustainable.
Unsustainable. So called creditors meeting. Sony were owed money. I was the biggest creditor, so I had guaranteed all the overdrafts. So about 198,000 plus change, sitting in overdrafts at two banks. Sony took a bit of a hit, and a few small companies took hits, but by and large, the view was very honourable in what I did. I left a good bit of cash in the bank account to pay the liquidator because there's 3 companies involved. Unfortunately, none of that money ever saw its way to any of the creditors, which annoyed me at the time.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, liquidation is an interesting business. I helped the liquidator at the time get all the debtors in. I paid all the staff myself, so nobody got out of pocket. And I ended up walking away. I suppose still integrity for me is important. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to mess with something that could follow me into the future. and actually it's a really important decision. But I walked away with 200 grand's worth of debt and no job, and a van, and I need to pay the van off. So things like that, I could you let a van go, they'll sell it for nothing. You end up paying off a vehicle over 3 or 4 years with no vehicle. So I went from really enjoying my cars and very high edge cars to a van. I mean, we had fun in the van too. I mean, we went from my car being full of kids going to football matches to nobody coming with us because we had a van. This big van. So I turned into a boogie bus. So I had loads of kits. So we put in the best subwoofers, better amps, all the lights, and you
cloud as a silver.
And you play whatever music you want, deafen yourself. So in ways it displaced an optical outcome of I moved a business close to home. It didn't work out. In ways, we spent 7 hours, sat down and said, okay, we'd have spent the money if we made it. We were now in a spot of bother. The house is okay. Thankfully, I didn't hock that. We're able to sort of stay alive, but it's tight. And I got a contract. Literally, I suppose I remember handing over the keys of the building I had rented, and I walked out and looked up and said, okay, I'm a bit fucked here. What am I going to do now? And I reached out to my network, and one of the network came back and said, I have a gig here in a bank for 6 weeks. Will you come in for do a bit of contracting? And it was a fairly significant project, Sarbanes-Oxley. Not a skill set for me, but the program was 300 odd people on it.
So the program meant to be.
Yeah. So I went in there to diagnose a problem. In fairness, and that came out of my days in Vision, and because we all marked each other's home, we all helped each other, reviewed each other, and straight away it was going back into muscle memory. Clarity, where we're going, what's wrong here, ask the right questions, listen, and that became then a plan. Bank asked me to stay for 3 months, then became a year, and that went into about 2007 into 2008, and basically I owed a lot of money to BOI. Of course I asked, well, could some of my gross fees go in? And said no. The way it works here is we pay you, you pay us back out of tax. So that took 5 years of 40 grand a year to pay that off. So 5 years, there was no holidays, we didn't. For the family, thankfully they were at a slightly younger age, but through my extended family and Orla's extended family, when they went on holidays, we took their houses, so we could be down in Kinsale, could be down in Escrone. So we made the best of what was there, Neil, and we didn't go hungry. We put things in.
No, when I'm trying to hear, I suppose one of the learnings I'm hearing, that resilience, that just ability to just kind of accept, dust yourself off and right, what can I focus on here, and let's crack on. Congratulations, just maybe the speed at which you just kind of got going again.
Yeah, so they could
focus on what you could control.
Well, you have to. Well, the thing is that is
family necessity. Right?
What do I stand for? What I stand for is I stand for I'm honest. I look after my family. I pay my debts. Yeah. So I made a particular choice. Like in the States, it's a badge of honor, but for me in Ireland, it was actually I'm in a predicament. I gotta get myself out. Part of the unfortunate timing was that the whole Liban's thing, or the whole banking collapse came. So the variable element of working in the bank, went out. So it was a case of literally batting down the hatches. But it worked a great. Financial services gets some bad vibes and feedback, which is often very unfair. I worked with some fabulous people, and very honourable people, and complex business environment. And I took a full-time job in the bank. And basically, I was I got parachuted in every 9 months or a year into an area that needed fixing. Okay. So I got to see between Ireland, UK, over to the States at BOI, huge part of the business. And actually it was like being back in the consulting days, like every year was something new. So it appealed to me because I'm a little bit of I like to see what's around the corner. Yeah. And, then, so we're going 28, but 2011, 2012, I cleared debt. Then the bank were outsourcing IT and change, and I took a mini exit. I wasn't there long enough for you to make a huge amount, but I decided I want to get back out there. But what was interesting was, Steph and Laura had a few heart-to-hearts really about, okay, where's next? I wanted to get back into business again. I got a lot of ideas, financial services. In fact, what I wanted to do was get banking in the cloud going, and I did some trial work with IBM at the time, starting off student accounts in the whole cloud vanilla system. And really one thing came down was, the bank wanted to see a solution, IBM wanted to see a PO, I was out looking for funding, and I remember vividly being out for, actually myself and Orla did a walk in Glendalough. And our ask was, look, the kids now are getting into the teen years. You know, you've had a crack at this. It went well. You know, we still have shareholding in the company, but we've had to pay stuff off, and we've all lived, you know, we've all worked through it as a family. The kids need a chance now, and you need to make a decision here. So I decided then, I'm now at a different side of the desk. I've got a good career I'm building. Sometimes felt like I was missing out, but actually in reconciling it, my commitment is to family too.
Yeah. It's it strikes me, and it's something I'm presumably aware of it, but it's nice to just where you talk about, I don't know, you know, the expression like behind every great man, a great woman, you know, and just that support, that stability, that backing, and it's just lovely to hear the way you talk about all, you know, all that. You know, it's again, your values kind of shining right through there. It's great, you know.
Yeah,
it's great to hear that.
We used to have a joke growing up, was that the boys chase the girls and the girls catch the boys.
Yeah.
You know, and my parents had a very balanced relationship, even though my father was a big man and quite, but they'd made decisions together and they disagreed together on things. And I took a lot of those values in. I met her at work at her tech company.
Yeah.
You know, and we talked about, I travelled a huge amount. Bought a house when I was 22 because I lived.
At least it was.
I lived out of the company suitcase, so I didn't need to spend money. Everything
saved to PDs.
I saved everything.
Expenses.
And I mean, enjoyed life. And enjoyed my car and stuff. But I'd saved enough at 22 to pay a good part of a house. Met her at work, in what became Capgemini, and I saw her under stress, she saw me under stress, there was no hiding places. So we started off a relationship with huge clarity, and we worked together a bit, socialised together. I helped a lot in pre-sales, she worked in the sales team. When I see them turn out 200-page tenders, loads of graphics and stuff, and in Word in those days I couldn't even type into the fucking, and never mind do that. And she had a good career in Capgemini, and I sort of left on the back of, we were getting a bit serious on the relationship, but we're 30 years married last year.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
But we share, we joint bank accounts, there's nothing hidden, we discuss everything, and there's no decision you can't sleep on if you're disagreeing. There's nothing, now we could be boisterous, when you have lack of sleep with kids growing up, and and I've gone fucked up things with money and the business. There's a little bit of right, preferred you hadn't done that, but what are we going to do now? And you just move on. I'm
going to finish and talk about great leaders and people that have influenced you. And one person that you referenced lots of people, so we can't go through them all today. But you mentioned Heraty as one of the best managers, best leaders that you've kind of witnessed. And for those that don't know, incredible. I think in the 80s, I think she set up CPL.
Correct, yeah.
Really successful recruitment business, got a great exit there recently. But you worked for her for a while. I'm really curious, what was her leadership style and her management skill set that you witnessed that still to this day you're like, okay, she was a brilliant manager,
absolutely,
a great leader. What was it? Give me some specifics if you don't mind.
Obviously, not leaving aside the excellent people I work with and work for right now, but definitely in my career, Anne is head and shoulders above anybody. I'd say definitely the best person I've ever worked for. And I suppose a couple of reasons. Is very clear on goals, and puts the effort into everybody getting clear on what are we trying to do together, even where we don't know what the outcome could be or should be. How do we measure it? How do we do it? That's one thing. Her own talent level was extreme. She's a really bright person, really good at sales, really good at relationships. I have rarely seen her angry. I rarely seen her get cross with people. Very good listener. So when you need to actually have that coaching conversation, it's a true listening conversation. It's not, you need to do this because it's, okay, let's talk about this. What are you trying to do? Where was it going? What were you thinking? And we had a lot of latitude. It's a growing company. Very honest about the finances, P&L and balance sheet. At a leadership level, working with her, I learned business, really, fundamentally.
A level of transparency.
Yeah. And when you're building, and you'll know about it in your building a contracting company where you guarantee the contractors are paid on the 11th of every month, and you're waiting 3 and 4 months for cash, and you've 400 and 500 contractors. That is big bucks, and it takes guts to be able to manage all of that, and to be able to go and ask a client who's reluctant to pay, to absolutely pay up. At a team level, we had a really good bond as a team. It was one for all for one. We were collectively always working together. A little bit like the vision thing, we marked each other's homework in a positive way, and we pointed out stuff really quickly to each other, and there was no fault. There was no fault, no arguments. We also socialised and had some fabulous fun. The camaraderie was there, and again, you know, but also at the time very respectful of work-life balance. She had encyclopedic knowledge of her staff's families, your kids' birthdays, who's doing what, your partners, all included in outings. And even to this day, when I meet her, as bubbly she comes, we remember the last time we met, can remember what my family are doing. It's an amazing trait that's there. But fundamentally, I think a fantastic head for business and a really natural way of dealing with people and dealing with all those behaviours in a very consistent way, but also always being calm, energetic yet calm, knowledgeable. And you know, for me, it was head and shoulders up. When actually there were very few female leaders in those days. She was the first CEO of a public company in Ireland. You know, and she won Entrepreneur of the Year and got where she is. You know, as we used to say, the harder we work, the luckier we get. Yeah. That's years and years and years of hard work, persistence, resilience, never saying dying, bringing in help when you did not be afraid to ask for opinions. So I think collectively, I mean, good leadership is obviously being authentic and people believing in you, but it's a whole suite of small things coming together in the right way. Like, it doesn't have to be anything exceptionally outstanding in one thing. And I suppose also is you could be vulnerable with her and tell her something that really bothered you about what you're doing in your job, you'd never hear back. So that intimacy in a work relationship is a fundamental part for me. You know, trust is, you're the capable or the reliable. Can you tell them something? And what's their self-interest? So Anne's self-interest was her business, you know, the people she worked with, but also her future. So there's a real balance. You know, when you look at you know, how trustworthy somebody is, scores high on all those different things. You know, so it's interesting when the tools that came later in life, looking back.
And it's clear that that's influenced you in relation to the leader that you've become and the stories that you've shared. So what a wonderful note to finish then. So Enda, thanks a million. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Neil. It was great to have the chat.